Stockton, and his name is Stockton Rush. Stockton, please stop me if I'm wrong here, but what is the problem? Are you hiding something from us here? Now, unfortunately, his ego and his cash flow have just went to his head. OceanGate have also decided they do not want to insure the vehicle. So basically, everybody that's going in this thing, they're paying passengers for $105,000 each. They're not insured to go in this thing. So that's the two key elements. The other main element in my thing is the actual the ceiling faces. So on the next section, on the domes which go on either end of the hull, in my report you will see some images in there. Now what happens is a standard O-ring groove for a pressure vessel of this depth, you can, to retain an O-ring, it's basically like a rubber O-ring which seals the two components. When you actually bolt them together, that is what is your pressure boundary, okay? So you'll get metal to metal facing, but in there you're squashing this rubber O-ring which is in a groove on one of the faces. Now what's happened is they decided to use an O-ring groove which is outwith of the spec that the rest of the industry use. It's basically a double dovetail, which I've highlighted in my report. That type of O-ring groove is absolutely no use for a high pressure vessel, because what happens is the void area is increased drastically when the water pressure, even though you get metal to metal sealing, okay, what happens is we're going to be seeing a depth, a pressure rating of approximately 6,000 psi. Now, even if you've got metal on metal, that water pressure will find the least path of resistance to break its way into the hull. Now what's happened is, not only is the O-ring groove out with a spec for the industry, they told the manufacturer, I've detailed in my report, that plunge hole has created a complete path for the seawater to creep in. Even when those two faces are bolted up tight, what will happen is the water pressure will work its way down there. And now, no longer have we got we've just got the risk of the O-ring going because of the type of groove they selected. We have a solid hole either side where that water will actually come into the hull, especially when they see deeper pressures. And when you see deeper pressures, I've been doing this for over 20 years, what happens is each individual face will buckle because the pressures exerted on each of those faces is going to be different. So there's flat faces, there's domed faces, there's horizontal, there's vertical. You get an immense amount of pressure. You get buckling. You cannot get away from that. And what's going to happen is when the ceiling faces actually start to buckle, that water pressure is going to go straight in there. Now, the company did pull a vacuum, so they mated the domes up in the factory in Everett. And what happens is you run a vacuum pump or a hoover, and you basically, you can suck all the air of it so that you get an altitude of, say, 2,000 feet, same as an aircraft. Now, what happens is we did see a leakage on that. Now, what happens is there is a huge difference between pulling a vacuum in a shop to compare to actually seeing external forces exerting on this thing and the water pressure coming in. That's a key area, which is highlighted in my thing. Now, another key area is the viewport on this vessel. I have been asking for several months for all the documentation on the design and also the pressure testing. There was a company called, which are down in California. They produce a good percentage of the acrylic domes and viewports for this type of submersible, these submersibles, and also provide surface-operated hyperbaric chambers. Now, what's happened is I was denied all the information repeatedly. I had emails, phone calls, direct correspondence, even the CEO. They refused to give me it. Now, any other company I've worked for, it's basically known as, you've got disclosure, full disclosure on that, because the pilot has to know that what he is about to go into these depths and perform ridiculous things at the end of the day, that it is safe and secure. Okay. And what's happened is, at my leaving interview, same, I asked again, I said, look, I am not pointing fingers or anything like that. I just want to know what is the pressure rating for that viewport? And basically the CEO turned around to me and he said, have you been in touch with the company, the fabrication company? And I said, no, I have not. Are you going to be in touch with them? I said, Stockton, and his name is Stockton Rush. Stockton, please stop me if I'm wrong here, but what is the problem? Are you hiding something from us here? Is there something that you don't want us to know? And he said, well, you're going to find out anyway. The viewport has only been built and certified to 1,000 metres. The viewport itself, the design, was done in-house by and his engineering team. His engineering team, this is their first job straight out of school. No experience in this type of industry before. They have, in their mind's eye, designed it to do 4,000 metres. The company that have built this thing and made it and bonded it all together are only willing to certify it to 1,000 metres.
Right.
So these are people, the company that made this, they have so much experience. They go by PVHO guidelines, which is a guideline that's basically a legislation for pressure vessels like this. And OceanGate have decided not to follow those guidelines. So because they're not following those guidelines, that are only willing to certify it to 1,000 metres. Now, they intend to do manned testing in the coming months in the Bahamas all the way down to 4,000 metres. One of the key things that I suggested, which you'll see in my cover letter, which is part of this report, is basically to do unmanned testing of the pressure vessel itself. So what you do there is you either put it in a pressure chamber in Penn State. The company decided they no longer wanted to use Penn State, even though we had been told that we were going to be going to Penn State with the pressure vessel. So they decided not to do that. And the owner wants to be in the sub to do all the live testing and basically work his way down to 4,000 metres. Now, in the industry, that is a no-no. I did explain that there would be all the liability if something goes wrong and you go in that sub. It's the aftermath of everybody that's left on the surface. We're the ones that's going to have to deal with the accident investigation teams. Blah, blah, blah. And he said, no, the only person you'll be liable to is my wife. Now, unfortunately, his ego and his cash flow have just went to his head. So I completely disagree with that remark. As with everybody else in the industry, you should be, if you're not willing to put it in a pressure chamber, put it on a wire, lower it from a ship, and basically bounce this thing with nobody in it. You overweight it, bring it back up, see how it goes. There has been so many vessels, manned vessels, where this has been done, that brought the sub back up to the surface, and it's collapsed. It's basically imploded. The metal is all twisted. Right. Even when these people have, built to spec, trying to build it to class. Now, most submersibles out there, they are classed under the 6 agencies, Lloyd's, ABS, DMV, GL, all these organisations. Most submersibles out there they'll be built to a specification, and what happens is most of the designers, in-house designers, will pass their designs to ABS, GL, all these organisations. They will verify that they're happy enough with the integrity of the design. Then they will also inspect the hull, they will inspect all the ceiling faces, they will do everything, okay? And what's happened is OceanGate have decided they do not want to class this. OceanGate have also decided they do not want to insure the vehicle. So basically, everybody that's going in this thing, they're paying passengers for $105,000 each. They're not insured to go in this thing. So basically what's happened is they're booked out to go to Titanic for 2 months this coming summer. Because I've raised all these safety concerns and because I was dismissed verbally, and because I raised all these, no finger pointing, no malice intended, I just basically wanted an official record because my capacity as a director of Marine Ops, I was responsible for the safety of all crew in the submersible and for topside operations. Because I have put in this report, the owner turned around to me and said, this is why I'm firing you, because you've done your job right. So that was part of my dismissal interview.
And who was that again? Stocker?
So the owner's name is Stockton Rush. He is a very influential person here in Seattle. He's old school Seattle. He has got very, very deep pockets, but unfortunately, and it's a shame, the thing is, I don't want to see anything happen to him. This is the thing, I don't want it on my conscience that nothing is done for people to, I'm not the only one that's got these thoughts. I mean, during my leaving interview, and when he disclosed all this information about the viewport, the two of us were so taken aback because they were withholding this information from staff.
Yeah.
You know, so,
Sounds
and then
pretty
obviously
bad.
he explains all this to me. I was devastated. I mean, I felt absolutely gutted. You know, they kept telling me, him and who was my equal, you know, but in charge of the engineering, they kept turning around saying, I've obviously got no confidence in senior management. And I will be honest with you. I turned around and I said, well, for you to turn around and say that you are willing to put a viewport on there that is only good for a quarter of the depth that you're going to be taking it to in the coming months with paying passengers, then I don't have confidence in senior management. I'm sorry. And the owner said, well, we've reached an impasse. If you don't have confidence in me, then I can't have you on the team. Blah, blah, blah. That's how that went on.
Right, so what company certifies the Cyclops to?
Nobody.
Nobody. They don't have
He
anyone.
does not. He does not.
Because it doesn't conform. It doesn't conform to any standard.
He does not. No, not at all. None of them. Because it's a risky job. Even when you're going in something that's classed, to go in something that's not classed, you know, at times it can be verging on the ridiculous, and people will call it cowboy, they'll call it rogue, call it what they want. Then what happened was the owner turned around just after Christmas and said, no, don't bother following up anymore with Lloyd's. We're not classing anything, so it's not going to be classed, it's not going to be insured. What's right next to that? The batteries. So basically you've got a fire triangle under your backside. Just a lighter took the flame away and it just continued to burn. It dripped on the asphalt and it reignited. It's just diabolical, you know, it really is diabolical.